Hello, everyone. This is Bill Griffin. Welcome to Different Take Podcast. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share, comment. I really appreciate you watching. Today, I have the pleasure of having with me Mr. Darrius Butler. He is a Democrat candidate for U.S. House of Representatives in Georgia's 8th District. Mr. Butler has worked in the banking industry and has also worked with nonprofit organizations and is a minister. Mr. Butler is a native Georgian, a lifetime resident of Georgia, and currently a resident of Warner Robins. Thank you for doing this.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Good. Tell us, if you could, please, about your district, some things about your district that you want people to know.
Yeah, listen, we are in Georgia's 8th District. We are so unique to the state of Georgia because we have a lot of the farms. So a lot of the cradle of Georgia's agriculture is here in the 8th District. So, a lot of the Tyson chicken plants, Purdue chicken plants, from peaches to Vidalia onions to pecans, we pretty much hold the cradle of Georgia's agriculture industry in the 8th District. Also, Georgia's biggest export, which a lot of people think that it's peaches, but it's actually timber and lumber. That majority of that comes from the 8th Congressional District because we have so many acres of land that's not even being touched. The old saying about Atlanta being the city in the woods. Well, the rest of the state is the woods. And, we have the biggest portions of, that export that comes out. Here in the 8th District, we are one of the only areas that lost people, lost population, but grew in size. So we grew in size, of the district itself, adding on new counties, adding on new places. And I actually think that it's a wonderful thing because there are so many marginalized communities that have, just been left out in the cold for so long. And finally, I'm able to step in and say, hey, let's see if we can get you some help. So we're now the largest district in the state of Georgia. We have, the biggest and most diverse population south of the, metro Atlanta area. And I'm so excited to hopefully represent this area.
Very good. So I'll get right into some questions. What should Congress do, if anything, to control inflation?
Congress needs to be doing a whole lot more than it's doing right now. I'm gonna be honest with you. Inflation is so serious of a situation right now. We saw just over the last 30 days, how we've now jumped up to a 9.1% interest hike on things like ice cream, things like milk, things like gasoline. And yes, gasoline is starting to go down now, but still that is due to one, having a better influx of oil coming in, putting more pressure on these gas corporations to not price gouge and just take advantage of the situation because they can. And the Congress and the government has to do a better job of making sure that people are not taking advantage of the consumers, because that's basically what's been going on. Yes, inflation is real. People have seen, the companies have seen a major increase in the product pricing themselves, but a lot of it also is due to price gouging just because they can. Price gouging because it's available and acceptable.
I lived through inflation in the 70s, and when I hear that, I think price controls.
Yeah,
so is that what you're referring to?
That's not really what I'm referring to. Price control, and I think this is such a nuanced conversation. So no, I wouldn't advocate for price control, but I definitely say we have to hold companies responsible to not, overextend, what they can do. I think we should have the active conversation to say, listen, this is a capitalist society. You have the right to set the prices at whatever you want to. All we're asking is that you don't overextend yourself more than what the population can handle. I don't think price control is the answer, but I definitely say we've got to have an active conversation, and we've got to at least say, hey, there's a cap on, what you're gonna charge. Just don't go over this. You can charge anything in between, but just don't go over this. Let's try to protect consumers Because at the end of the day, if the consumers cannot afford to buy the goods anyway, we're just going to fall deeper into a recession because they're not going to be able to afford the high priced goods.
In the kind of started around 72, went
Mhm,
18 years or something,
mhm.
where you had the Federal Reserve rate was higher than the inflation rate.
Yeah.
And there was government spending was reduced. Is that, you see the same thing happening long term?
Yeah. I'm gonna be honest with you. One of my big concerns is, the Federal Reserve raising, interest rates up because, that is not going to take a full and active effect long term to actually fighting back the inflations that we're seeing. I think what we're really going to have to do is try to have we're going to have to definitely cut back on government spending. That's a necessity. We're going to have to try to balance our budgets out a little bit better. We're going to have to try to ensure that states, just like, for example, Georgia, that has, these budgetary surpluses, make sure that that money is actually going to help consumers. Just like, for example, what Brian Kemp did, and I will give it to Governor Kemp's credit, to say, hey, we're going to try to tap down on a little bit of the gas tax that's going on to try to make it a little bit easier on consumers. We're going to take some of the money that we have had in the government in the state of Georgia's surplus, and we're going to give it back to consumers so that way you can afford to do, things, even though it was, small amounts, $250 per taxpayer. But it's those things like they're taking the surplus of cash that these so many states have and saying, okay, we're going to put it back to try to give a little bit of a cushion for individuals. And I think that that's the best way that we're gonna actually fix the problem. The interest rate hikes are a s- are a s- the interest rate hikes are, like I said, going to take a long time to actually do what people are expecting is going to happen in 6 months, and that's just not realistic.
That's what history tells us in not only the United States, but countries around the
Yes.
world. You did the money supply, this expansion of the monetary policy has been to
Mhm.
expand. It's enabled Congress to spend something like the debt to GDP, something like 125%. I think it's good to hear you say that we need to balance
Yeah.
our budget. So
Yeah.
if you're elected, you would be in favor of.
I surely would. Yeah. No, I surely would
I
because
mean,
I
and
think.
you're also, don't mind me interrupting, but that's
Oh, go ahead.
also kind of, you don't hear a lot of Democrats say that.
You know what? And I think that that's the problem. I think that that's the big problem, because the Democratic Party has been painted with this broad brush of just being avid spenders. But if we actually, one, elect people who have balanced their own personal budgets, who, have worked in the finance industry, you understand the importance of balancing budget and not overspending. And I think we've gotten into this pattern of over delivering, over giving, and
Over
we need
promising.
to over promising. We need to bring it down a little bit. We need to take the money that we already have in the system. Let's utilize the money that's already being flown in and out of the system. Make the necessary cuts where we have to, and say, okay, now we're going to make sure that across the board everything is fair, everything is solid, and everything is firm. And I think if we continue to do this whole, kicking the football down the field to the next generation or for the next 10 years, or we keep on doing all of these different amendments that are saying, well, we're not going to focus on balancing the budget now. We're not going to focus on what's going on right now. We're going to do that in 5 years, or we're going to do that in 3 years, or we'll do that after the election is over. That's how we continue to be in these same situations. And yeah, you don't hear a lot of Democrats saying it, but I will, to the party's credit, the people who are being nominated now, and this might be more of a grassroots effort rather than a party effort itself, but a lot of the folks who are being nominated and being elected right now are what I like to call good old common sense folks. People who understand that the pathway that we are on is neither good nor bad, but we have to begin working in the middle. So we can do all of the great social programs that are a necessity for our society to thrive. They are a necessity. But that does not mean that we have to overextend ourselves to the point where we're always, working in the red. We're always working behind. We have to do it responsibly while still fulfilling the promises that were made. But just do it responsibly.
To be fair, knock on Republicans is they would talk a good game, but they're big spenders too.
Exactly.
Politicians like to spend money. That's what they
Exactly.
do. Okay.
Exactly. And that's why we need less politicians.
So it's kind of this question just popped me in the head, and I the way I approach this, I sort of ask questions.
Okay.
As a constituent, not as a journalist, because I'm not really a journalist. But so another perception of Democrats, and not just Congress, but Democrats in general, Democrat voters also, there's a portion of them that are perceived as anti-capitalist.
Right.
Well, first question is, do you sort of acknowledge that, and do you fall into that category if you acknowledge it?
Gotcha. Yeah. So I'm gonna be real honest with you. I am a historian first. Like that's my, I'm a pastor first, then a historian. And you are 100% correct. There is a big groundswell of folks who are anti-capitalist. I personally don't think that you can have anti-capitalists in a capitalist society. It really doesn't make any sense. So I would not call myself an anti-capitalist. No, I believe capitalism is the best way to do it. I think that, our system of government is the best way to do it. Our financial system is the best way of doing it. Does it have problems? Without a doubt. Does it have its downfalls? Without a doubt. Do we put more power and authority in the hands of large corporations? Of course. I think the role of representatives of this government must be to support industry, and we want industry to grow. We want companies to be able to become as big as they can possibly become, but we also need to support workers. We also need to be supporting individuals. We need to be in supporting the employees, and that's the great balancing act that as an elected official I'm going to make it my business to master, because capitalism is the way to go. It is in my opinion the only way to go, but it has to be properly regulated, properly expanded upon, and properly understood.
This is something that really that Congress doesn't deal with, but you hear people in the House of Representatives talk about this quite a bit, is this idea of ending the filibuster in the Senate. What do you think about that?
You know what? That is such a double-bladed sword. I'll be totally honest with you. It's such a double-bladed sword because the Democrat in me, is frustrated with, the gridlock that the Senate has had on regardless of who's in control, whether it's Democrats or Republicans. I hate the gridlock. I hate that we've gotten so marginalized in our corners that we don't try to compromise. We don't meet in the middle, and we can't peel off Republican votes, or Republicans can't peel off Democrats' votes to get the job done. So for me, I do believe the filibuster is a humongous hindrance to, getting things done. However, I think if you want to get things done, and if the filibuster is not going anywhere, which it doesn't seem like it's going to be going anywhere anytime soon, if you care about it that much, then you need to have more people elected on your side of the aisle. And I think that if we're going to stick with the idea that the filibuster is this, this grand old, piece of history that just must stay in place, then we need to do more to get more people elected who are like-minded and who will go and do the jobs that, the people are asking them to do. So it's such a hard question. That probably is one of the hardest questions you'll ask me all day. I promise you.
I perceive it doesn't really matter what party it is. Donald Trump wanted to get rid of the filibuster. The folks that are screaming the loudest about getting rid of it now, well, they didn't want to get rid of it then.
Right.
So it just depends on who's in power. But the other thing I've noticed over the years is, I mean, the United States is, when you talk about gridlock, in terms of spending, there hasn't been a lot of gridlock. There's
Yeah, there
gridlock on a
hasn't
lot
been.
of other
Yeah.
things, but they've really, I mean, on the spending, they don't always agree on what to spend on, but
But they always agree to spend something. So yeah,
correct,
that's
correct.
true. Yeah, that's true. And and it's so unfortunate because I am a big advocate for voting rights. I do think that the voting rights bills that have been, presented, they should be passed. I am a big advocate. I was a big advocate for the infrastructure bill, the roads and bridges, but then the family infrastructure, the soft infrastructure things that I felt should have been passed. I was upset when the soft infrastructure, the family infrastructure, was not passed. But rather than tearing down the filibuster and then, say, for example, Mitch McConnell becomes majority leader again in 2024, now you're mad because, the filibuster is gone and people are pushing everything through. I just say, if that is the case, invest in getting more people who are like-minded on your side of the aisle elected.
Something that people don't talk about that much, but Congress passed a law that gives companies like Alphabet, Facebook, the big internet service providers, immunity. So the vast majority of people don't have a problem with this, but I can have a business, or someone can have a business. I can defame them and I'm responsible, but Facebook published my post and they're not responsible. What do you think about getting rid of that and treating them like a publisher, like newspapers?
I stand with you 100%. We have got to hold these.
So you're pretty familiar with the issue then?
Oh, very familiar. Yes, I actually had a whole discussion with some young Democrats of Georgia about this exact issue, because we're sitting here charging folks who are spewing a lot of hatred on the internet. Yes, they should be charged. People who are just out there just defaming folks and lying on people, they should be charged. Or people who are getting folks killed and hurt and stalked, they should be charged with crimes. But we cannot overlook the behemoth companies that are allowing this type of hatred to just spew and be pushed around on their platforms. So we do need to take away the immunity that Facebook and Twitter has had for so long, because at the end of the day, we see how this has led to the erosion of our democracy. We see how folks have, people genuinely do believe in lasers from outer space changing votes. And that's because those lies were able to be amplified on social media, and there has been nothing. We're holding the folks responsible who were saying the lies, but not the folks responsible who continue to let the lies be pushed out to millions of folks. So I do believe we need to know that these entities are journalists and they should be held to the same standard that journalists were held in. And just to take it a step further, like I said, the historian in me always comes out, because if you think of back in the early, the turn of the 20th century, in the 1900s, with the radio and the TV coming around in the late 40s, early 50s, there was this rule, with radio and with print media, that said you have to make sure that you have folks on both sides of the aisle having equal time to get everything out. And you want to always have fact checks. And that was taken down in the early 1930s, which gave way to what we now know as, the current opinion news. And I am a big advocate for going back to that early stage of the media, saying, hey, we've got to hold these guys responsible. You need to fact check everything that you're saying. You need to be fact checking, the things that you're putting out there. And I'm a big advocate for bringing back that piece of legislation that's been gone now for, 70, 80 years. But I think that it's important to have.
But you're not talking about restricting protected free speech, though, are you?
No, not restricting free speech. No, we have the right to free speech. But that free speech needs to come with a, disclaimer from this Facebook to say, this is the facts of whatever this is. You can say what you want to say, but here are also the facts. Or even say, for example, when you have, the opinion hosts who do have their shows. You have your opinion, give your opinion by all means. But then here are the facts later on, whether it be, written down, just something where people can say, I've heard your opinion. Now let me also see the facts. And I think that that's the way that we're going to at least get out of this confusion where, we're putting feelings over facts, because at the end of the day, the facts don't care about our feelings.
What do you, I looked at your website and the healthcare system, and and I didn't see this, so I was curious about it. Are you in favor of some sort of healthcare system such as the UK has?
Most definitely. Most definitely. I think that every single American citizen should be able to go to a doctor, to a hospital, to any type of medical center and walk away, get some care, get some coverage, and not have to worry about a bill that's about to come next. I think that there's no reason why we are here as the richest nation on the planet and people do not have access to healthcare. I think that healthcare should not be attached to your job, because right now, for example, people who lost their job during COVID, in the midst of a pandemic, were not able to go get good, adequate care because they did not have insurance until the hospitals and the doctors and all of that finally said, okay, we're going to take you. But then people still had bills for 50,000, 100,000. I had an uncle who was in the hospital for, a little under a month. And the bill that he got was astronomical. And, much like a lot of young people say to Sally Mae, I don't know how I'm going to ever pay you back, because you just can't. So we do need to create a system in which every single American citizen has access to free and adequate health care. No question about it.
So one of the issues with the UK system or Canada is they have to ration the care. Now, and to a certain extent, in the United States, I suppose you have ration care too. But what I hear you saying is their system of rationing care is better than our current system.
Well, our current system of rationing care is broken. And I'll give you a great example of that. For example, you have areas in the 8th Congressional District that don't even have medical centers. You have areas in the 8th Congressional District where people have to travel up to 2 hours to go to a medical center. Then they go to that medical center because the medical center itself is not well funded, because the medical center itself has a budget that it is hanging onto by a shoestring. People end up not getting the care that they need anyway. So I'll give you a great example. One of our chairs actually had his mother who had a stroke. They went to the hospital in the middle of the night because the stroke happened in the middle of the night. It was luckily a light stroke, but a stroke nonetheless. They said that unfortunately they would not be able to run the necessary test on her tonight. Please bring her back in the morning. Well, come to find out, the reason why they asked her to come back in the morning was because the budget did not afford for them to be able to have a technician on staff that could work the machine after a certain hour at night. So at the end of the day, we're going to have to better fund our medical centers, and we're going to have to make sure that as American citizens, a right that we should have, just along with our right to bear arms and the right to free speech, we need to also have the right to good health care. And, rationing care, I think when it's well funded, it's not rationed in the way that it's rationed now.
What do you think of the Biden administration's immigration policy? And I'm talking about really the results compared to the Trump administration's policy, or the results, I should say.
If I can be candid for a moment, I think both ideas are just totally off base. I think both administrations and previous administrations going back even to the Clinton administration has been just off base, and we have not had a truly comprehensive system. Whether it is, okay, we're going to say you have to stay on the Mexican side of the border and wait, or whether they say we're going to let you come on in and do this. I think both are done wrong. We can have a comprehensive system and we can have places set up for these folks to go. The holding facilities, I think, that were, being utilized during the Trump administration, even during the Obama administration, I think is the right way to go. But it needs to be better equipped to account for all of the people that are going to be there. I think if we're going to say the policy is going to be that you're going to stay in Mexico while we book you, that's fine. but let's just make sure that folks are given the necessary resources to do everything that they need to do. If the policy is going to be, oh, well, we're going to let you come into the country and wait out your time in the country, we need to have a better way of finding out where people are, going, who these people are, and exactly what are they doing. So I think both administrations and a couple of administrations previous to that have kind of missed the mark on a good, comprehensive immigration system, because ultimately America needs immigrants. We do need immigrants, but we do need immigrants who genuinely want to come work. They want to come be a part of society. They want to come, chase the American dream. And we need to have a system that's going to be put into place that's actually going to say, okay, we want you to come in. We want you to be a part of the fold. But in that, we want to make sure that you're really coming here to be a part of the fold. So I think we just need to all out totally reconfigure our immigration system. And that's going to take a lot of conversations. That's going to take a lot of different ideas on both sides of the aisle, and even in other parties as well, so we can all put everything together and come together and say, okay, now here's the right answer, because it has a mix of everybody's ideas.
Well, I think the big difference between the two, though, are the flow, just in numbers. So which administration is the flow of immigrants is more appropriate, I suppose I would say. I'll just say this. I met people, I mean, we live in Georgia, so we don't have to deal with this like you do in Texas, but I met some people in El Paso, and they said today it's almost, their city is a real mess. Whereas during the Trump administration, a lot of them or whatever hate him. They didn't have the issues that they have now. So
I tell you, you see, I'm trying to tap dance around your question, but I'm gonna come with you. Then I'm gonna come with you. I'm gonna be honest with you and say the flow has definitely picked up a lot, and I think that is because of they spoke to a lot of immigrants during the outgoing Trump administration coming into the Biden administration, and the conversation that a lot of immigrants were saying, well, Biden cares. He's going to listen to us. He's going to let us in. And so that was the green light for a lot of people to try to make the treacherous journey. I think we can be compassionate and we can care, but the flow was a whole lot better because less people were coming under the Trump administration. I think that we can talk about the facts. You're right. Less people were coming under the Trump administration, and that is because a lot of the deterrent actions that were being taken. Now, I don't personally agree with the way that they were deterring people, but the flow was less. But at the same time, I don't agree with the way that the Biden administration is handling it as well. I think what we're going to have to do is be firm, yet be compassionate. We're going to have to say, this is what, we want you to come in. We want to get immigrants. We want to, continue to build up America with the brightest and the best. But at the same time, within moderation, within time. And I tell you, the best way to fix the immigration system, another thing, rather than, because everybody sees America, especially in South America, as the shining city on a hill, to coin a phrase from Reagan. We need to at some point continue to invest, and when I say invest, I'm talking about minuscule amounts in these other places to try to help show them how to clean up their act. That doesn't mean we have to go cutting checks every which way, but to have the conversations to show folks, hey, this is how you clean up what's going on. And if we can help them to clean up their messes, people will stay. If, people don't leave a happy home. So if we can just try to help create the conversation and push the narrative and show these folks, how to weed out corruption in their systems, how to, have a comprehensive government where it actually will help out the people, then you'll see the flow begin to slow down, because people will stay where they are. But if we continue to turn a blind eye to everything that's going on in South America, we continue to not try to offer, some brotherly advice, and we just keep on saying, well, you guys do what you're doing, and they keep coming up here to spend time with us, the system continues to be flooded with folks who are just trying to find a better life. Whereas instead, let's show the blueprint of how to have a better life right where you already are.
What do you think of this question that was on the Georgia, it was on Democrat primary ballot?
Mhm.
The question is, should the United States remove obstacles to economic advancement by forgiving all student loan debt?
You know,
Yes,
that's
that's correct.
that is something that I'm gonna be honest with you. Student loan debt is crippling for myself, for a lot of the people that I know personally. Student loan debt is crippling. It is a serious hindrance for purchasing a house, getting your debt to income ratio down. It's a serious hindrance to a lot of things that affect us in the day-to-day operation. I do think that something should be done to help uh, knock off student loan debt. That doesn't mean we have to take out 100%. I love that President Biden is, because he did promise to do something about student loan debt, that he is trying to help medical students to knock down, a certain amount of their debt, or helping people who, went into the service industry to knock down certain amounts of their debt. I think that that's the right way to do it. But I think the better opportunity, rather than saying, okay, we're going to wipe away 100% of your student loan debt, instead, let's try to fix the education system so that way people don't have to go to school and walk away with $100,000+ worth of debt. So I think it goes better with investing in the system rather than just a broad stroke of the pen, wiping away 100%. Let's actually fix the problem that got us here in the first place.
I asked this question of another candidate, and okay, well, what about the people that paid back their
Right.
loan? And they, everybody has different spending habits.
That's
And
true.
some people, sacrificed
A whole lot.
a whole lot to pay it back. So what about them? And the response was that I don't want, but he used the word resentment, which I don't know what you think about that, but the idea of, well, if you forgive debt, then that encourages people to take on more debt and to not pay it. I mean, what do you think about that?
Unfortunately, human nature will say, if I have something freed up, I will go get more. But I don't really believe that that would be the case in this particular instance. Now, I will say, and I don't want to use the word resentment, but my mother and I have this conversation all the time. My mother just last year was luckily enough to pay off her student loan debts. My mother graduated back in the 80s. She finally paid off her student loan debt. And I remember as the conversations were going on about, forgiving student loan debt, my mother was livid. She's like, "Are you serious? Like, I just paid this off and now you're talking about getting rid of student loan debt?" And I understood where she was coming from, because a lot of people did, have these debts that were, stop them from getting houses, had to pay them off so they could get a house, had to pay them off so that way they could get their debt to income ratio down. People had to get them deferred. And I do understand, the people who invested the time to try to pay it off. And I'm with them. I stand with you 100%. I still think something has to be done to make this system better, so that way folks don't have to get in there. And like I said, I don't think the broad brush of, okay, getting rid of 100% of student loan debt is the answer. I think we can knock off a good amount, because that's what was promised. Knock off a good amount. And I think that we can make it where the people who have paid their student loan debts, give them a tax incentive for paying their student loan debts. Because if you're going to say we're going to take 100% off for everybody that, that's currently paying on it, the people who already have paid theirs off feel some type of way. So you say, okay, well, here's a little quick tax break for you because you paid your student loan debt off yourself. And I think that that's the way that you're going to be able to kind of make it less of a slap in the face for the folks who paid their stuff off.
What do you think about the tax code? Do you advocate any change to the tax code, especially
Yeah.
particularly the corporate tax rate.
Definitely, definitely. And it kind of goes right back to our conversation earlier about these behemoth companies who, are not being held responsible for speech, or, the companies that are paying less in taxes than you and I, the, billion-dollar industries who are, paying less taxes than you and I, who are seen as being entities that have their own voice, but not able to pay, a fair share of taxes. We are in a situation right now where you have, companies and corporations who are able to throw millions of dollars behind political candidates just to keep the tax code as it is. I think we're going to have to create a more comprehensive tax environment so that way it is at least fair. I think from a historic standpoint, we're going to have to go back to a point where it was fair that companies and corporations are paying, a small percentage of their actual income, rather than it just being the wild, wild west of taxes, where, everybody's paying different things and different companies have different breaks. And what happens is you'll have, like I said, these million and billion-dollar industries who are monopolizing industry, like Georgia Power, for example, monopolizing an industry and paying less taxes than, say, you or I or any other small business.
Corporate tax rate's 15%. Would you like to see it changed, or are you saying we need to not subsidize companies as
I
much,
think we should stop.
and
I think we should stop
and not
subsidizing.
have as many deductions and that sort of thing?
Yes, exactly. I think the 15% is doable. I think if I'm not mistaken, I think what President Biden was advocating for 17 or 18, but I think, 15 to there, I think that's reasonable. But, stop doing all of the subsidies, stop doing all of the bailouts. We need to stop doing the frivolous spending, because just like we saw during COVID, where, we bailed out a lot of the, auto industries back during the recessions. We bailed out a lot of these other, billion-dollar industries, these humongous corporations who got a lot of the assistance that was supposed to be going to helping small businesses and individuals, that went to these companies and corporations under the guise of trickle down, which is just not realistic. So instead, let's not invest so much in bailouts. Let's not invest so much in subsidies. Let's not invest so much in tax break options. And let's just tighten it up where, people aren't getting $1 million tax breaks.
What about individual tax rates?
Yeah, individually, I think what we're going to have to do, especially in considering everything that's going on from a financial standpoint that is hitting individuals, we're going to have to make sure that we do provide, the incentives for individuals who start businesses, individuals who have businesses. We're going to have to, the loopholes that the companies and corporations are taking advantage of, we're going to have to make sure that consumers have access to a feasible and comprehensive tax code understanding. So that means that we're going to have to say, hey, right now, how if you own a house, you can write off certain things on your house. If you're taking losses on your business, you can write off certain things on your business. The loopholes and all of the tricks of the trade that the companies and corporations are taking advantage of, we need to educate, everyday taxpayers to say, hey, here is how you can actually, pay a fair amount of taxes, but still not get, torn up by the current tax code, because you might not be putting enough in, or you might not realize that you have feasible deductions that you're missing out on.
What are the big things you disagree with regarding your opponent? What issues are you had the biggest disagreement on?
The good thing about it, I'm gonna be honest with you. My opponent is a very interesting fellow. Like I said, I'm a pastor by trade, so I try my best not to be too negative of anybody. But I just disagree with the morality of the representative. Representative Scott has voted against so many different things that I wouldn't personally be able to sleep with myself if I voted against him. He's on the Armed Services Committee and voted against protecting veterans and giving investing well into the VA. Representative Scott has, daughters, nieces, and women in his life, and voted against protecting women from domestic violence. Representative Scott voted against so many things that could help people. Representative Scott voted against firefighters, where to say for firefighters who go into active fires, who can contract any type of disease dealing with their lungs for inhaling, the smoke and all the gases and fumes. There was a bill that came up that said, we're going to help you if you contract a disease, and we're going to make sure that you're okay. We're going to take care of you and help you out. And you voted against that. Now, I'm not saying that we have to be paying people hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we need to be protecting folks who are running into active fires. That's just the bare minimum.
Yeah, I mean, so many times those things are tied to other big
other big
spending
things.
bills, and that might have been what the problem was. I mean, it's always kind of it seems like there's always a little bit of a give and take with these guys.
And I love that you pointed that out.
Either party.
Either party, but I love that you pointed that out, because here's my response to that. If that is the case, then you have a responsibility to say, I agree with this 100%. I could not vote for it because it was a part of this bigger spending package. However, I'm going to sponsor this bill individually, and we're going to get it passed. Over the past 12 years, Representative Scott has only sponsored 3 bills. Now, he does a great job of co-sponsoring other folks' work, but for 12 years, he's only sponsored 3 bills. That is a problem. And the 3 bills that he sponsored, none have been within the last 4 years. So when it comes to what I disagree with Representative Scott on, I would never disrespect somebody to talk about them and their personal self. Won't do that. But I disagree with his voting record. I disagree with his standing in our community, because at the end of the day, the 8th district is has the second highest rate of poverty in the state of Georgia. The 8th district has 16 counties that are right now without a doctor's office in them, which means, let's not even just talk about the OBGYNs. We're talking about a doctor's office, a primary care physician. 16 counties do not have a doctor's office in them. We are in a situation where there are food deserts in our area. Coffee County in Douglas, Georgia, just has been without water for the past couple of days. And obviously that has nothing to directly do with the representative, but you said absolutely nothing about getting these folks some clean water, or advocating that the money that was passed in the infrastructure package comes to the 8th district to say, hey, we need to fix our water pipes. Our water pipes in my hometown of Pulaski County have been the same pipes that have been there for now 50 years. That's a problem.
What do you think there ought to be a national law regarding abortions?
You know what? I can proudly say that I am a pro-choice pastor. I think that the choice is yours. Now, does that mean that I'm advocating for abortions? Does that mean that I'm, saying that, just giving out free abortions? Representative Scott's talking about recreational abortions, and that's just not true. I think that without a doubt, the choice should be up to the woman, her partner, and her doctor. The federal government has no role in that place. Now, that does not mean that we have to agree with it. That does not mean that we have to say, what someone can or cannot do with their bodies. But what that does mean is that we preach the lesser government intervention, and the government does not have a place in that doctor's office. So it should be protected to say that's your choice.
Okay, so you make sure I understand. You're saying there should be a federal law, and that the
to protect choice, yes.
To that a woman has an unfettered right to have an abortion.
You use the word unfettered.
Yeah, I mean, because that's what the issue's been all along, really. At the end of the day,
there should be a federal law that says that a woman and the partner, if the partner is active, has the right to make that choice for themselves.
So it's unfettered right.
Unfeathered, yes, sure. Let's go with that. Okay. Unfeathered. The choice should be up to that family, not to the federal government.
Okay. I'll just say one thing. So
go ahead.
People always say, well, this never happens, but
right.
If it never happens, why not codify it? Is the other side of it, which right. is, okay, you're at 30 you're 28 weeks,
Mhm.
and you're saying you don't see that you don't see distinction between there's no protection for the unborn child at 20 weeks up until 2 days after they're born.
Okay, so now the one thing, and
Because
this
that's
is,
where a lot of people have the problem, is they go,
yeah,
okay, well, I'm not comfortable with this kind
yeah,
of thing.
and let me be very
In other words, they're
upfront and
saying
honest
that
with
they
you.
have the unborn child should have some protection. I mean, that was the decision of Roe v. Wade. It wasn't an unfettered right.
Yeah, no, I think, and this is where there has to be one, a federal standard to say, because, and let me just make sure that I say this properly. Under no circumstances should anybody be at 8 or 9 months pregnant, 7 months pregnant, at that far in the game, unless it is literally detrimental to the woman's health, talking about something like that.
It's not
There should,
elective.
right, there should, exactly, it shouldn't be
Okay.
elective. There should obviously be a cutoff time, but I think the issue is by bouncing it to the states, where the states can all, in 50 different states have 50 different rules about what that cutoff time is, or in some states just saying you don't have that right at all. That is a problem. So I still wholeheartedly stand by that right, and that choice is yours, because that is your personal bodily autonomy. But of course, within reason, there should be a cutoff time to say, okay, now it's a little bit too far in the game for you to be talking about this, unless it is detrimental to your health. Unless it is, and I want to also just underscore, because I've heard a lot in a lot of different circles where people are saying, the most mundane things are quote unquote detrimental to the woman's health, to try to get around as a loophole. And I don't think that that's right either. But I wholeheartedly stand by a woman and her partner. If the partner is active in that life, they are the only ones who should be able to make that most intimate decision, not the government. Because I just don't believe in that much government intervention.
Well, let me ask you this. You've been very kind with your time, and I appreciate you doing this.
Of course.
This I've asked other people this question, and so I feel like I should ask it with you. So with the voting by mail, there's no guarantee that a person will vote in secrecy. So
Right.
here's my question. Is it unreasonable? And usually I don't preface the question, but some people get a little confused about it. I don't think
Yeah.
you would, but I thought I should preface it because for the listener's sake.
Yeah.
Is it unreasonable for citizens to believe that voting ought to be done in secrecy? In other words, it's mandated that it's done in secrecy except for certain carve outs, which means you can only vote by mail unless you're, invalid or in the military or some other excuse.
You know what?
And my question is it unreasonable for citizens to think that ought to happen?
I'm gonna say yes and no. And I'm gonna give you the no first. No, it's not unreasonable, because your vote is very sacred to you. And your vote is something that I believe every single American citizen should take very seriously. And you should, be proud of your vote to the point where you say, hey, I'm going to cast my ballot. I don't want you to see who I'm voting for and go. But the yes becomes, I'll give you a great example. My great grandfather, he just passed away. He was 101 years old. He was a World War II vet, and I would help him to vote. And now, mind you, he had a touch of dementia at 101. He was 101. He had a touch of dementia, but
it's fantastic.
Yeah. No, he was a trooper. I'm talking about a trooper. And even still, like I say, he had a touch of dementia to the point where he did not know who I was, but he knew that I was related to him, and he thought that I was my uncle. So he was good. He always thought that he would always say, Stacy, are you going to come help me vote? And I'm like, yeah, I'll be there knowing that I'm not my Uncle Stacy. And so I would go and I would talk to him, and he's 101, the silent generation, who has totally different views and opinions than I do. But I would help him vote, and he would literally have me sit there and tell him, like, I had to take my laptop, had to tell him, who this person is. He wanted to see pictures of them. He wanted to know what they stood on this different thing. And there were so many cases where he voted totally different than how I would have voted. And that's okay. So I think people should be able to help you. It shouldn't be secrecy in the fact that from your family who is helping you, if you're a senior citizen, or if you are, or even myself, like say for me, if I'm fine, but if I'm just have a lack of understanding of the candidates, to have someone who has a better understanding sit down with me and explain to me kind of where that is. I think what a lot of people's fear is the fear of coaching, or the fear of people pushing folks in another direction. But I think the better opportunity would be if we just better educate folks. And if we say, okay, every single person can have a ballot. I think mail-in ballots should be, your choice. You say, hey, I want a mail-in ballot, go get your mail-in ballot. Or, hey, no, I want to do it in person. I'll drop it off, or I'll go do it, stand in line and do it. I think we need to have these options open, and we need to make sure that every single person in the United States of America is automatically registered to vote, because that's basically what this country is built on. Every single person has the right to vote. And I think a thing that we really need to focus heavily on is saying, okay, if we're going to do this whole, ballot secrecy, if we're going to do this where no mail-in ballot for any reasons, unless it is, you are
The standard carve outs.
Right, the standard carve outs. If it's not standard, and we say, okay, you have to come and do it in person if there's nothing wrong with you, then okay, then we need to have extended voting times. We need to have more investment to have more locations. We need to better educate folks to make sure that everybody understands, hey, this is the time that you need to be going. Here's the best days to go on. We need to make it a federal holiday so folks can be off. If this is the option to say no more mail-in ballots unless it's the special carve-outs, then we need to say it's a federal holiday. Go vote. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that do you think there should be a national voting law? And that was a very thorough answer, by the way.
Thank you.
I want to say something else about that to get your opinion on it.
Okay.
But what do you think there should be a national voting law, or each state should handle their own?
You know what? And that is once again, that historian comes out in me, because I think there should be national guidelines. There should be national guidelines, but right now the states do have control of their elections. And I think that is, in a way, the best way of doing it, but there should be a national guideline to say, hey, this is what needs to be done. So whether that is nationally, every single American citizen needs to be registered to vote, and say, but you guys manage the elections process however you want to do it, that's fine. Or if there's a, nationally, we're going to say that, as a citizen, you can, I don't think we should nationalize elections. They should be handled by the state, but there should be a guideline, if that makes sense.
I view politicians might be sort of callous about the mail-in voting. In other words, I've interviewed people, and it is an unknowable thing whether or not a person would cede their vote, would let somebody observe them, coach them, as you've said. Right. And so I think a lot of people, as you said, it's reasonable to think that it ought to be done in secrecy. But if people needed help, actually they needed help, and then maybe they go into the polling place. I'm just bouncing that off of you. But what I was going to say was their response has been, I don't see any evidence of that. And my response is, well, of course you wouldn't, because mama's not going to turn her son in or something like that.
Exactly.
You're not going to, it's an unknowable thing. But my point is, I think a lot of politicians perceive, and it works both ways. If Democrats think they're going to get an advantage by voting by mail, the callous, maybe not callous, the skeptical nature in me says, Well, if I'm Michael Bloomberg and I want to throw $400 million in a campaign with voting by mail, I just try to buy as many votes as I can if that's feasible.
Right.
Do you think the voting by mail should be part of the federal guidelines, that every state ought to have the universal voting by mail, that sort of thing?
You know what? I do believe voting by mail should be definitely part of the federal guidelines. Yes, every single state should have access to voting by mail. Here's going to be my response, though. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to, I was referring to universal voting by mail, is what I was referring to.
Yeah. So here's going to be my response. And let me just make sure I have a clear understanding of when you say universal, you mean that is the predominant option.
Anybody that wants one can get one.
Gotcha. So now here's the thing about that. And I'm going to take, for example, the few cases in 2020 where, folks were getting ballots for people that were deceased and they were voting for, the quote unquote fraud. I think what we need to do is say, yes, any person can get a ballot. Every single person should be able to get a ballot. There should be no questions about that. But what politicians need to do, and I think it goes square into your answer about the callousness, do a better job of educating folks. Do a better job of getting people on your side. Do a better job of campaigning. Because here's the good thing about it. And I'm gonna throw a funny little story in there for a moment. In 2016, I was a little bit all over the place, right? I really didn't like anybody on either side of the ballot, but I had this joke that a lot of people perceived as a joke, but it was pretty serious. If everything would have fell, and please remember, preference this with, I am a hardened Democrat. Please preference this with that. But in 2016, if I just had to make my choice and I didn't like any of the options, I remember specifically having this conversation with my grandfather, who also was a former elected official and a former a solid Democrat as well, that I was going to vote for Jeb Bush. And I remember his look on his face and when we had our mail-in ballots and all of that. And the joke was, if you try to vote in the Republican primary for Jeb Bush, I'm going to fight you. Like, you can never come over here ever again, And I think the good thing about it is, when we worry about people coaching folks, or we worry about people doing that really doesn't happen. Because when you have your mind set up on a candidate, regardless of who tells you which way to go, you're going to say, yeah, but I like this person. Now, you might have that small percentage of folks that will vote the way someone else wants them to vote. But for the most part, if you're sold on a candidate, you're going to vote for that candidate. If you're sold on that person, or if you're strongly firm because this person came and they knocked on your door, they called your phone, or you like their message, you like the way that they present themselves, you're going to vote for them regardless of whatever type of steering or quote unquote steering is happening.
Well, I really appreciate you taking time to do this. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Butler?
Yeah, I tell you, I love to just end every conversation with this, for you and for your listeners. We've had a pretty extensive conversation and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I didn't even realize at the time that's gone by because I was enjoying it. And I like to preface it with this, I'm sure in our conversation, there are things that we probably have not agreed on. There are different small portions of, say, okay, I can work with this, but I don't work with that, or I can agree with this, or I can't agree with that. I'd like to remind folks that is what this is all about. It's about us having a conversation, and it's about us saying, finding somewhere in the middle that we can get along with, having the conversations to say, okay, I can't stand with you on this, but I can work with you on that. And when you asked earlier about what do I disagree with Representative Scott on, the opponent on, it's just that he doesn't do that anymore. When he first got started, he did. When he first began his political career, he did work across the aisle. When he was in the legislature, he did do work with Democrats. He worked with former Governor Roy Barnes. He did, work across the aisle. He's just gotten to the point now where he doesn't even entertain the conversations anymore. And it's just gotten too far deep into the party's pocket. You understand? So I think if I just want to have any closing remarks, it's no, we might not agree 100%, but I guarantee I'm gonna listen to you, I'm gonna value what you say, and we're gonna find somewhere in the middle that we can meet up on and say, okay, now let's march forward together.
Well, that's I think that's a great way to look at it. I do have respect for people that are running for office for good intentions, because a lot of people don't do that. I mean, for the honest motivations, I should say, not for they're not in it for the business part of it.
Exactly.
So I thank you for doing this. How do people find you?
They can go to the website, www.darriusbutler.com, or you can just Google Reverend Darrius Butler. I always tell folks, make sure that you put the Reverend in front of it, or you're going to get the former quarterback for the Colts. So you always want to make sure that you put the Reverend in front of it.
And it's Darrius with 2 R's.
With 2 R's, yes, sir. With 2
Okay.
R's.
Well, very good. Well, thank you very much. And you've been, I've had Darrius Butler, who's Democratic candidate for the United States House of Representatives in Georgia's 8th district. And I thank you very much for doing this.
Of course. Thank you.
You've been watching the Different Take podcast with Bill Griffin. Please, if you like this content, subscribe, like, share, comment. Thank you for watching.